The day James Brooks collapsed in the lobby of Meridian Enterprises wasn't supposed to change anyone's life. But as CEO Alexander Reed stepped over the unconscious janitor without a second glance, 7-year-old Olivia Brooks watched from behind a potted plant, her small hands clutching her father's lunchbox. That moment would shatter Alexander's carefully constructed world in ways he could never have imagined. If you're moved by stories of unexpected connections and second chances, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more heartfelt content that reminds us what truly matters in life. James Brooks hadn't always been a janitor. Once, he'd been a promising architectural engineer with dreams as tall as the skyscrapers he helped design. But life has a way of dismantling even the most carefully drafted blueprints. When his wife Sarah died unexpectedly during childbirth, James's world collapsed around him. The grief consumed him, making it impossible to focus on complex calculations and demanding deadlines. One mistake led to another, and soon he found himself without a career, raising a daughter alone. Alexander Reed, on the other hand, had never known failure. The 42-year-old CEO of Meridian Enterprises had built his empire through ruthless determination and an unwavering focus on success. His corner office on the top floor of the gleaming Meridian Tower offered a panoramic view of the city he felt he owned. Divorced twice, with no children, Alexander's life revolved entirely around his company. People were assets or obstacles, nothing more. The morning everything changed began like any other. James had been working the night shift, staying late to cover for a sick colleague. Exhaustion clouded his vision as he mopped the marble floors of the lobby. He'd been pulling double shifts for weeks, trying to save enough for Olivia's upcoming school trip. His daughter was the center of his universe, the only light in his increasingly difficult life. Olivia hadn't planned to visit her father at work that morning. But when she discovered he'd left home without the lunch she'd carefully prepared, a peanut butter sandwich with the crusts cut off, just the way he liked it, she convinced her neighbor Mrs. Patel to bring her to the Meridian building before school. "Daddy will be so hungry without his lunch," she'd explained with the earnest concern only a child could muster. When they arrived, James was just finishing his shift. The exhaustion of working 16 hours straight hit him all at once. As Olivia spotted him across the lobby and called out, James turned, smiled, and then crumpled to the floor. Alexander Reed was striding through the lobby at that exact moment, his attention fixed on the quarterly reports on his tablet. When the janitor collapsed mere feet away, Alexander merely sidestepped the fallen man, not even looking up from his screen. "Someone call maintenance," he muttered dismissively, continuing toward the elevator. Olivia froze, her father's lunchbox dangling from her small fingers. She watched in disbelief as the tall man in the expensive suit stepped around her father as if he were nothing more than a piece of misplaced furniture. Something fierce and protective ignited in her young heart. "Hey," she called out, her voice surprisingly strong. "My daddy needs help." Alexander paused, annoyed at the interruption. He turned to see a tiny girl with wild curly hair and mismatched socks glaring at him with an intensity that momentarily caught him off guard. "Security will handle it," he replied coldly, turning back toward the elevator. "But he's a person." Olivia persisted, rushing to stand between Alexander and the elevator doors. "You can't just leave him on the floor like he's garbage." The lobby had gone silent. Employees and visitors alike watched the confrontation between the powerful CEO and the determined child. Alexander felt their eyes on him, judging him. Irritation flashed across his face. "Young lady, this is a place of business, not a playground. Now please move aside." Olivia didn't budge. Tears welled in her eyes, but her chin remained defiantly raised. "My mommy died when I was born, and Daddy says that means we have to be extra kind to each other because we're all we've got. But I think it means we should be kind to everybody." Something in her words penetrated Alexander's carefully constructed armor. For a split second, he saw himself through this child's eyes, cold, uncaring, inhuman. The realization was uncomfortable, like an ill-fitting suit. Before he could respond, the building security team and a paramedic rushed to James's side. Olivia immediately abandoned her confrontation with Alexander and darted to her father, dropping to her knees beside him. "Daddy? Daddy, wake up. I brought your lunch," she whispered, her small hand patting his cheek. Alexander found himself unable to walk away. Something about the girl's devotion to her father held him in place. He watched as the paramedic checked James's vitals and administered oxygen. "Severe exhaustion and dehydration," the paramedic announced. "He needs to go to the hospital." "I'll go with him," Olivia declared, clutching her father's hand. "I'm sorry, sweetie, but you can't ride in the ambulance," the paramedic explained gently. "Is there someone we can call for you?" Panic flashed across Olivia's face. "Mrs. Patel had to go to work. There's nobody else." Alexander surprised himself by stepping forward. "I'll take responsibility for her." The words left his mouth before he could analyze them, before he could consider the implications or the inconvenience. The paramedics loaded James onto a stretcher. As they wheeled him toward the exit, Olivia trotted alongside, still holding the lunchbox. "Daddy, I'll come see you soon. This man is going to help me," she said, pointing to Alexander. James's eyes fluttered open briefly. He looked confused, concerned, and then slipped back into unconsciousness. Alexander stood awkwardly beside Olivia as the ambulance doors closed. For perhaps the first time in his adult life, he had no plan, no strategy for what came next. "What's your name?" he asked, looking down at the girl. "Olivia Brooks." "I'm 7 3/4, she replied, studying him with unnerving directness. "You're the boss, aren't you?" "Daddy says the boss lives in the sky part of the building." Despite himself, Alexander smiled. "Yes, I suppose I do work in the sky part. My name is Alexander Reed." "That's a long name," Olivia observed. "Can I call you Alex?" "No one calls me Alex," he replied automatically. Olivia shrugged. "Someone has to be first." And just like that, Alexander Reed, feared CEO and ruthless businessman, found himself escorting a 7-year-old girl with mismatched socks to his executive office, where his assistant Janet nearly dropped her coffee at the sight. "Mr. Reed, your 9 o'clock is waiting in the conference room," and Janet stopped mid-sentence, staring at Olivia. "Who is this?" "This is Miss Brooks," Alexander replied formally. "Her father has been taken to the hospital, and she'll be staying with us until arrangements can be made." Janet's eyebrows shot up, but she quickly composed herself. "Of course. Would Miss Brooks like some hot chocolate?" Olivia's face brightened. "Yes, please. With marshmallows if you have them." As Janet led Olivia to the break room, Alexander called the hospital to check on James's condition. The news wasn't good. Extreme exhaustion had triggered a minor heart episode. James would need to remain hospitalized for at least a few days. Alexander's day unraveled from there. He postponed his 9 o'clock meeting, cancelled his lunch with investors, and found himself sitting across from Olivia in his office, watching as she methodically arranged the contents of her backpack on his imported mahogany desk. "This is Mr. Whiskers," she explained, holding up a well-loved stuffed cat. "And these are my colored pencils. I'm very good at drawing. Want to see?" Before Alexander could respond, Olivia had flipped to a blank page in her sketchbook and begun drawing with intense concentration. Alexander checked his watch, wondering how he'd extricate himself from this situation. There were calls to make, decisions that would impact thousands of employees and millions in revenue. "Here," Olivia said, pushing the sketchbook toward him. "It's you." Alexander looked down at the drawing. A tall stick figure with a frowning face stood alone on the page, surrounded by what appeared to be money symbols and tiny computers. "You look sad," Olivia observed. "Are you sad because you don't have any friends in your picture?" The question hit Alexander with unexpected force. When was the last time anyone had asked about his feelings? When was the last time he'd even considered them himself? "I'm not sad," he replied automatically. "I'm busy." There's a difference. Olivia considered this, her head tilted thoughtfully. Daddy gets busy too. But he always says that being busy isn't as important as being happy. Your father and I have very different perspectives on life, I imagine, Alexander said, unable to keep a hint of condescension from his voice. What's perspectives? Olivia asked. It means ways of seeing things, Alexander explained. Your father sees the world one way, and I see it another. Olivia nodded sagely. Like how I think broccoli is yucky but Daddy says it's delicious. Despite himself, Alexander smiled. Something like that. The day progressed in a series of unexpected detours. Alexander found himself explaining his job to Olivia, who seemed fascinated by the concept that he was in charge of everything. If you're in charge, why don't you make a rule that daddies don't have to work at night? She asked, swinging her legs as she sat in his executive chair. It's more complicated than that, Alexander began, then stopped. Was it really? He'd never considered the night shift workers, the cleaning staff, the security guards who kept his empire running while he slept in his penthouse apartment. By afternoon, Alexander had learned more about Olivia Brooks than he knew about most of his executives. Her favorite color was rainbow. She was in second grade and loved science but thought math was tricky. Her teacher, Ms. Rodriguez, had a pet iguana named Fernando that sometimes sat on her shoulder during reading time. Olivia missed her mother even though she'd never met her, and she kept a picture of her under her pillow so they could talk before bedtime. When Janet suggested they should take Olivia to visit her father at the hospital, Alexander found himself volunteering to drive them. His sleek sports car wasn't equipped with a child seat, so they took Janet's practical sedan instead. At the hospital, James Brooks was awake but groggy. His face registered shock when Alexander Reed walked into his room alongside Olivia. "Daddy!" Olivia cried, rushing to the bed. "Are you better now? I brought Mr. Whiskers to help you feel better." James hugged his daughter with one arm, his other connected to an four. "I'm feeling much better, sweetheart." His eyes never left Alexander's face. "Mr. Reed, I don't understand." "Your daughter is quite persuasive," Alexander replied simply. "She's been keeping me company today." James looked embarrassed. "I'm so sorry if she's been a bother." The neighbor who was watching her had to leave for work, and... "She's been no bother," Alexander interrupted, surprising himself with his sincerity. "She's actually been enlightening." The doctors informed James that he needed complete rest for at least a week. His face fell at the news. "I can't miss work for a week," he protested. "We need the income, and Olivia will stay with me," Janet offered unexpectedly. "My kids are grown, and I have plenty of room. She can come to the office after school until you're back on your feet." James looked overwhelmed. "I couldn't ask you to." "It's arranged," Alexander cut in. "And you'll receive your full salary during your recovery. Consider it part of Meridian's employee wellness program." The look of gratitude on James's face made Alexander uncomfortable. He wasn't accustomed to genuine emotion in business transactions, and that's how he initially viewed this situation, a transaction, a problem to be solved efficiently. But as the days passed, something shifted. Olivia became a fixture at Meridian Enterprises, doing homework in Alexander's office, charming the executive team with her forthright questions, and gradually, imperceptibly, changing the atmosphere of the entire floor. Alexander found himself looking forward to their afternoon conversations. Olivia approached life with a curiosity and openness he'd long ago abandoned. She asked why the sky was blue and why adults drank coffee when it tasted like dirt. She wondered why some people had so much money while others had so little, and why Alexander didn't have any pictures of people in his office, only awards and certificates. "Don't you have a family?" she asked one afternoon, peering at his desk where most executives displayed photos of spouses and children. "I have parents, but we're not close," Alexander admitted. "And I've been divorced. Twice." "What's divorced?" "It's when two people who were married decide not to be married anymore." Olivia considered this. "Were you mean to them?" "Daddy says people leave when someone is mean all the time." The question stung with its accuracy. Had he been mean? Not in the way a child would understand, perhaps, but he'd been cold, distant, prioritizing work above all else. "I was busy," he said finally. "Too busy to be a good husband." Olivia nodded as if this confirmed a theory. "That's why you need to learn how to not be busy all the time. So people will stay." On the 5th day of James's recovery, Alexander found himself doing something unprecedented. He left work early to take Olivia to the park. Janet had a dentist appointment, and rather than arranging for another caretaker, Alexander simply closed his laptop mid-email and announced he was taking the rest of the day off. The park was filled with children and parents, a world Alexander rarely encountered. He sat awkwardly on a bench while Olivia played on the swings, feeling out of place in his tailored suit among the casually dressed parents. A woman sat down beside him, smiling as she watched her own child on the monkey bars. "Which one is yours?" she asked conversationally. Alexander hesitated. "The girl on the swings. With the curly hair. She's adorable," the woman replied. "My son Jack is on the monkey bars. They grow up so fast, don't they?" Before Alexander could correct her assumption, Olivia came running over, her face flushed with excitement. "Alex! Come push me on the swings. I want to go super high." To his own astonishment, Alexander found himself standing, removing his suit jacket, and following Olivia to the swings. He couldn't remember the last time he'd been to a park, let alone pushed a child on a swing set. Yet here he was, his hands gently pressing against Olivia's back as she soared higher and higher, her laughter floating back to him on the breeze. "Higher, Alex. I want to touch the clouds." Something loosened in Alexander's chest as he pushed the swing, as Olivia's joy became somehow contagious. For a moment, the quarterly reports, the acquisition deals, the board meetings, none of it seemed to matter. There was only this moment, this child, this simple act of play. When James was released from the hospital, Alexander insisted on driving him home. The apartment building was in a modest neighborhood, the kind Alexander normally only saw through the window of his chauffeured car. The two-bedroom apartment was small but meticulously clean, decorated with Olivia's artwork and family photos. "It's not much," James said apologetically as he eased himself onto the worn sofa. "But it's home." Alexander looked around, noting the careful touches that made the space warm and inviting despite its simplicity. A bookshelf overflowed with children's books and engineering manuals. A half-completed puzzle dominated the coffee table. Plants thrived on every windowsill. "It's nice," Alexander said, and meant it. There was something here his penthouse lacked, something essential he couldn't quite name. Olivia gave him a tour, proudly showing off her bedroom with its constellation of glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. "Daddy put those up so I would never be afraid of the dark," she explained. "He says Mommy is up with the stars, watching over me." As Alexander prepared to leave, Olivia hugged him fiercely around the waist. "Thank you for taking care of me while Daddy was sick," she said. "You're not as grumpy as you look." Alexander laughed, a genuine laugh that surprised even himself. "Thank you, I think." James extended his hand. "Mr. Reed, I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done." Alexander shook his hand. "Alexander, please. And there's no need for thanks. Your daughter, she's quite remarkable." "She is," James agreed, his face softening with pride. "She's the best of her mother and, hopefully, a little of the best of me too." As Alexander drove back to his empty penthouse, he found himself